Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Foxy and this is Foxy Books and Planning. Today I am coming to you with my July reading wrap-up for 2020. It was definitely a big month in terms of reading. I've got a lot of books completed. I have a huge victory in my reading progress to tell you all about, and I'm just really proud of myself this month, and I hope I can carry the momentum over into August. But there's a lot to get through, so let's just jump into it. So things I finished this month. So the first book I finished in July was The British Are Coming, The War for America, Lexington to Princeton, 1775 to 1777 by Rick Atkinson. This is his first book in his Revolutionary War trilogy. I had this as an audiobook from my library and I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was very informative. I liked the narration style. I liked the writing style. It wasn't too technical. It wasn't too narrative. It was a good mix of both. The only thing that threw me off was that there was a fairly sizable introduction written by the author that referenced a lot of the fun quips and interesting tidbits that he added into the narrative. And so when we got to the points where they showed up in the story and those exact phrases, those exact sentences popped up again, I got real confused. I didn't really understand why he needed to state them twice. And I feel like he was trying to do a lot in a little bit of time because he's trying to cover the entire revolution in 3 novels. But I feel like there were some things left out that he could have spent some more time on. But it's what it is. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it as a good primer for the American Revolution if you know nothing about it and if you're interested in learning about it. The next book that I finished was A History of Death in 17th Century England by Ben Norman. I received this as an electronic ARC from NetGalley. It is scheduled to be published in September of this year. And I gave it 4 stars, and I'll talk more about this and some of the other galleys that I've read recently in a different video. I'll link it up in the cards when that video goes live. But I really enjoyed this book. It was short. It was comprehensive. The way that the author groups the different types or the different aspects of death together is really interesting. He didn't harp on anything for too long. My only complaint is that he didn't spend that much time on actual death. A lot of the book was focused on the accoutrement for death, so wills and burials and that kind of thing. And there was time spent on the actual modes of death, but there wasn't a lot of detail given that I felt that the author probably could have gone into more depth about. And I'll leave it like that, and I'll talk more about it in my other video. The next book I finished was 7th Inning Heat, which is book 1 of the Vegas Aces series, if that series ever continues. It is a romance series by Lisa K. Adams. I had this as a personal ebook and I gave it 4 stars. I said in my mid-year book freakout that Lisa K. Adams has quickly become one of my favorite authors, especially for romance, because she tends to take the common romance tropes and play with them in ways that I find really original as someone who has read a lot of fan fiction in my lifetime. I think I read this book in a day. It was that compelling for me to keep reading. With that, we're following a pitcher for the Vegas Aces, which is a Major League Baseball team, and the female pitching coach who has been brought on to save the team, and they have some history, and romance novel shenanigans ensues. But like I said, really enjoyed it, really looking forward to reading more Lisa K. Adams. And this is not the only time she comes up on this part of my video. So the next book I finished was The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which I had as an audiobook from my library, which I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed this audiobook. Joe Morton of Eureka fame is the narrator for the audiobook, which is amazing. He does an amazing job. Probably one of the best audiobooks in terms of narration that I've listened to this year. And the story, we're following Hynynen, who is a slave in in antebellum Virginia, who is a mixed race child as a result of his mother being raped by the head of the household, or possibly having sexual relations. It's kind of not clear. But he is taken in to be a house slave, in which everyone, the house determines that he has this prodigious memory. What else happens after that? There's an incident in which he has a vision of his mother, who he doesn't have any memories of, while he's driving a carriage with his his half-brother in the back, and the carriage capsizes and his brother dies, and he survives, and he is transported or conducted through the water to safety, and he escapes to the north and becomes a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and encounters Harriet Tubman and learns from her about the powers of conduction, and tries to go back and save his family. I really, really, really enjoyed this book. I highly, highly recommend it, especially the audiobook. It is difficult to read or listen to in my case, because it does cover some very tough subjects, and subjects that those of us who are not people of color or Black, or have not had those experiences or those stories passed down to us, don't quite understand, and I really appreciated that look. The next book I didn't technically finish. I DNF'd it at 33%, which that's Espionage in the Divided Stuart Dynasty, 1685 to 1715 by Julian Whitehead. I had this as an e-arc from NetGalley. Like I said, I DNF'd it because I wasn't more than halfway done. I'm not giving it a rating. It does come out at the end of August this year. And the primary reason I DNF'd the book was, to me, like, going back to A History of Death. I liked A History of Death because it focused on death and looked at it from every facet of death that would have been a part of 17th century life. Here, when I see that the title is Espionage in a Divided Stuart Dynasty, I really want the book to focus on all the facets of espionage in the Stuart Dynasty for that time period, and talk about the types of espionage that were going on, the different spy rings, how they affected the things that were going on. Instead, I really just got a history of Stuart England from 1685 to 1715, and I gave up. James II was I didn't even get through one monarch. I think I was just at the Glorious Revolution. And while I find this particular period of English history, because it's one that I don't know a ton about, very interesting, the writing style wasn't for me. It didn't make it interesting or compelling, and there wasn't enough spycraft in it for me. All right, next, I have the physical book here, is Undercover Bromance by Lisa K. Adams. This is book 2 of the Bromance Book Club series. Like I said, she was going to show up more than one time on this list, and I gave this book 4 stars. I actually went out and purchased it this month because I really wanted to read this one, and it was going to take too long to get from my library. So in this one, we're following Braden Mack, who is one of our side characters from the first book, and our female lead is Liv. Yes. Who is the sister of the female lead from the first book. And Liv has been fired from her job at the swankiest restaurant in town after witnessing a Me Too moment between her supervisor and the hostess. And so Liv goes on a crusade to basically ruin the chef's life, because she is very adamant that no one deserves to be treated that way, which is the truth. Go her. And so Braden takes it upon himself to be her assistant in that. And there is romance. There's just not... The romance isn't the focus. It's really... At the beginning of the book, they mentioned that Braden Mack's favorite subgenre of romance is romantic suspense. And so this is really what this book is it's Lisa K. Adams' ode to the tropes of romantic suspense. And the reason that this got 4 stars, and I'll have to look back to see if Bromance Book Club got 5 stars. But the big thing for me was the thing that I loved about Bromance Book Club was that there were chapters of the book that the book club was reading interspersed with the narrative that we were following of our main characters. And this book doesn't have that. It doesn't have it at all. There are mirrors to the typical romantic suspense novel, but I'm missing the core elements of what made Bromance Book Club so interesting and so groundbreaking for me. But I really did enjoy it. I'm still looking forward to book 3. I'm really interested to see how Noah and the Cat Cafe go. So we will see when that one comes out later this year. All right, the next book I finished this month was an Audible original. It was free this month. I think I will have this up in time that if you want to pick it up, you can, which was Agent 355 by Marie Benedict. I gave it 3 stars, and I went into some detail in my review on Goodreads, but the biggest thing for me was that this was too short. So the Audible originals, at least in my experience, have ranged anywhere from an hour to 8.5, 9 hours. And this was 2 hours. So it was on the shorter side. And the author was attempting to give a backstory for the real life Agent 355 of the Culver Ring during the Revolution, who was a female spy. And to me, this just felt so incredibly rushed, to the point where the romance element of it wasn't super believable. I wasn't quite certain how we got from A to B. I really wanted this to be longer. I really thought that this could have been fleshed out into at least a novella, and if not, a full short novel. So that was really the thing for me, was I wanted this to be longer. Next, very, very exciting for those of you who have been around for multiple weeks, multiple months of book wrap-ups. I finally finished A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin. I gave it 4 stars, and I had this as an ebook for my library. It took me... Future me, tell me how long this took me to finish. But anyway, so this is the compilation novel that George R.R. Martin published of the first 3 Dunk and Egg stories. So these take place 100 years before the Game of Thrones series proper, and we're following Duncan the Tall, who is a hedge knight, and Aegon Targaryen, who is his squire. And there are 3 short stories in there, or short novellas, that kind of chronicle the early days of their relationship. And I really loved these. I'm not that big of a fan of the actual Game of Thrones series. I'll probably give it another shot at some point. But there's just too many points of view to keep track of and too much stuff going on in those books. In this, we're following 2 characters the entire time. The plots are straightforward, but we still get that amazing world building, that the world feels large and lived in and amazing. And I just really, really enjoyed this. 4 stars just because the second story to me went on a little too long. The first and third stories are tight and compact, and I love them. The third story, meh. But that is neither here nor there. I'm still happy to have finished it. I'm happy to have it off of my progress list, and so I can focus on some other books that I'm working on. All right, next. Another Audible original. This was one of the options that was free in the month of June. Forget Nothing, which is part of the Galaxy's Edge series by Jason Anspach. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I gave this 5 stars. It was my only 5-star read of the month. I really, really loved this for a couple of reasons. The biggest of which was, to me, this novella was what's great about military science fiction. Personally, I really love military science fiction. Part of that is how I was raised, because my parents are also really big into military science fiction. But the easiest way for me to describe this is take the world structure of Star Wars and put Starship Troopers in it. So in this particular novella, we're following Major... Oh, have I already forgotten her name? Her first name is Andy, or Andine. Not that I can remember her last name. I'm sure I'll leave myself a sarcastic reminder about what it actually is. But Major Andine, who has been sent to a Midrim planet to keep the peace and try and root out a separatist terrorist cell that is basically anti-republic. And while she is in command of the Galactic Marines that are there, and while she's there, she runs into a group of Black Ops Legionnaires. The Legionnaires are they're a separate branch of military, but they're very similar to Special Forces or Green Berets, SEALs, that kind of thing. But this platoon of 4 guys are the Black Ops, so they're the best of the best. And she ends up saving them during an ambush. And there's a whole second part that I don't want to spoil, but I really loved this. I loved the politics. I loved the characters. I loved the world building. I loved that the authors have been heavily influenced by the types of warfare that we currently are seeing play out in things like the Middle East and Afghanistan and Iraq. And we're able to pull that into a galactic setting and make that work and talk about some of the issues that we see in today's military, like women in the military and what's women's roles in that sphere. Really, really loved it. Highly, highly recommend it. I will definitely be picking up the actual main series and getting into that in the near future. All right, the last book I finished this month was The Shadows by Alex North. I had this as an e-arc audiobook from NetGalley, because NetGalley started allowing us to request audiobooks. I gave this 3 stars, and basically what this came down to was I finally figured out that Alex North is not the author for me. Now, why is that? So basically what it comes down to is Alex North's style of thriller is not the style of thriller I like. There isn't a whole lot of attention spent to the central murder or inciting incident of the novel. There's a lot of things unraveling secrets and all of these side things, and the book to me came across very similar to The Whisper Man, which I read, I believe, in March, where we have 2 separate storylines. We have a detective who's trying to solve a series of murders. We have a dude who is dredging up things from the past, learning secrets about the past, reliving childhood trauma, etc., etc. And I didn't appreciate it because we spent a lot of time with the man, which he was the important part of the story, because it was a lot about dreaming and memory and can we believe our dreams and what happened to his childhood friend. So he's trying to figure that out while the detective is trying to solve her murder cases as well. But so to me, there wasn't a whole lot of time spent on the central mysteries. It was just kind of like we're having all of these discussions about dreams and memory and what's real and what's not real, and then we get to the end and there are reveals, and I don't know why we're revealing how these things are reveals. And I'm just kind of like, okay, how does this relate to the last 200 pages or 4 hours of audiobook I've listened to? And I've had the same feeling about The Whisper Man. It was a really quick read for me when I had it, but when I got to the end, I didn't really care because there wasn't an interesting twist. There wasn't a reveal that was mind-blowing that completely changed the way you read the novel. It was just straight A to Z. And that's not the thrillers I like. I like the twisty-turny ones. And I really like detective novels. And if I want a thriller, I really want either a single detective or a single driving motivation. There can be side plots, but I really want the focus to be on that main driving force, and I didn't feel that with this particular book. It is available now if you would like to pick it up yourselves and read it yourselves. I highly recommend you do that just to figure out if it's something for you or not. So with that, we move into the things that are currently in progress on my reading list. There are a lot. The first one is The Conductors by Nicole Glover, which I have as a NetGalley e-arc. I am 17% of the way into that book. In that one, we are following Henrietta and Benji, who are escaped slaves who are living in Philadelphia and are sort of conductors on the Underground Railroad, but it's a slightly different world where we have magic, and Africans have different magic than whites, and the whites have been suppressing black magic for centuries. And Henrietta is a gifted magic user who is using her gifts as part of the railroad and is trying to find and bring her sister to the north. And there is a murder, so I'm really hoping it's going to be a fun murder mystery. But we will see. I'm enjoying it so far, but I've got a large chunk of the book to go. The next book I'm working on is The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith. This is the first book in the Cormoran Strike series. I am planning to reread the entire Cormoran Strike series in the next month and a half, because the next book in the series, called Troubled Blood, comes out at the end of September, and I want to be ready. I have reread this book several times. Cormoran Strike is probably my favorite detective series, with the favorite modern detective series, because favorite detective series would be a toss-up between Hercule Poirot and Nero Wolfe. But this is a series I've reread a lot. I really enjoy Cormoran as a character. I really enjoy Robin Ellicott as a character. I enjoy the focus on the mysteries, which is why I didn't like the last one as much, which I'm hoping will be redeemed in the next one. But in this one, we are solving the mystery of if Lula Landry was murdered. Cormoran is a down-and-out private eye. Robin is his temporary secretary. And Strike has been engaged by Lula Landry's adopted brother to try, because he is convinced that she has been murdered. I really enjoy this series. I recommend it to a lot of people. The only reason you might not read it is by J.K. Rowling of Harry Potter fame and other dubious honors. But she does write this under a pseudonym. And personally, I find it really hard to remember that this is the same lady that wrote Harry Potter when I read this. So I'm happy to be reading it. I am 23% of the way in. This book and Undercover Bromance are part of a new plan that I have been doing, where since I work from home, this book sits in my restroom for my restroom breaks. And so this is what I read during those breaks. I normally read like 4 or 5 pages at a time, so slow going, but it gets books done and gives me a little mental break in the middle of my workday. But yeah, so enjoying this one. I always enjoy this one, so I hope to get through the series right on quickly. The next book is sort of a book, which is Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. This is a comic book, but this is considered one of the greatest comic books ever, and is on my list of 100 greatest science fiction and fantasy novels. So if NPR considers it a novel, we are now considering it a novel. I do also have this as an ebook, but I don't particularly care for Kindle's comic book reading software, because it does one frame at a time, which can be really annoying because I'm much more feel like I want to see the whole page and then I'll read. But with this book, I am 11% of the way in, so this is where I am. I really enjoy it. I tried it once or twice before. I forget how far I actually got those reads. But like I said, I didn't like the interface, so I have it as a physical copy now, and I'm hoping I'm going to bust through it now that I have it. The next one, big jump in progress. Heart of Europe, which is a history of the Holy Roman Empire by Peter Wilson, which I have as a personal audiobook. I made 24% progress this month, which is huge for an audiobook that is 40 hours. And I'm getting through it. I'm hoping I will have it done in the next couple of weeks with the way work is going. But really, it's a nice book to have as background noise, and I'm able to absorb the information, but I'm not having to read each and every word because it is very academic and not very engaging. But I still like it as a good history novel, or not a history novel, a history tome on a part of history that I'm not super well versed in. Next, Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. I have this as an ebook from my library. I made 1% progress this month. Childhood's End is a first contact story from the 60s. It's a classic of science fiction. So that's another one that I'm hoping I will make a lot of progress on in the coming days. Next, I got Alexander Hamilton back from my library this month. This is the Ron Chernow biography that is the basis for the Hamilton musical. I had this as a library audiobook, and I made 18% progress this month. This one, I was a little surprised by how far I got. So I'm only, well, I say only, I'm like 26% of the way through the book, maybe 30 if I push it. And we're already at the Constitutional Convention. So I'm like, what's the other 60% of the book gonna be? But we'll find out. I really enjoy it. It's a very, very interesting biography about a founding father that, until the Hamilton musical came out, most people didn't know existed, other than he got shot in a duel. But I digress. Still really interesting, still really happy I made progress this month. And last, my two shames that I'm sure no one is surprised that I have made no progress on in the last 2 months, or the last month, was Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which was a library ebook, and Lord Foul's Bane by Stephen R. Donaldson, no progress as a personal ebook. In terms of things that are on deck for this month, I do have 3, and that's really tentative on how many currently readings I can get wrapped up, because I know I have to get the Conductors wrapped up this month. And I'm hoping I will have The Cuckoo's Calling done in the next 2 weeks, probably. Watchmen as well. But I need to clear some stuff off before I go to the next thing. But the first on deck is an audiobook from NetGalley. Thank you so much, NetGalley, for giving me all of these arcs this month. It's an audiobook called Untold Mayhem, which is a short story collection, and I seem to have misplaced my author's name, so I will throw it up here as a subtitle. This one already came out. It came out back in May. It's a collection of horror, science fiction, fantasy short stories about quarantine, so I'm super interested in here for it, and I'll see how it goes. The next is my physical book, which would be The Silkworm by Robert Galbraith. This is book 2 in the Cormoran Strike series after The Cuckoo's Calling. This is a different edition, which will drive me batty, but I like these covers better, so I will keep them forever until I can find a hardback in this or a floppy paperback with this cover. But this is the next book, which is the murder of a failed writer, semi-failed writer, which has a lot of weird, fun twists and turns in it that I'm looking forward to rereading. This is the one I've reread the most of all of the Cormoran Strike novels. And then the last one I just got from NetGalley as an e-arc is a book called The Long Dark Road by P.R. Black. And from the brief description, it's a thriller about a woman trying to find the truth about what happened to her daughter 20 years ago. Her daughter went missing and was never found. So this is her going back to the road where her daughter went missing to try and figure out what happened to her. So with that, we are now at my favorite part of the time, which is the wrap-up stats. So in terms of statistics this month, I completed reading 10 books. And this will not change because I'm nowhere near finishing any of the other books on my reading lists by the time this will be edited and uploaded. I have 8 books in progress, and I have 3 on my shelves. And if you total up all of the reading progress on my currently reading books, or my in-progress books, I've made 94% worth of a book's progress on those. So overall, really, really great month in terms of the number of things read. And a pretty good month in terms of how much I liked the books I read. Most things got 4s. There was 1 5 and 2 3s and a DNF. So overall, a pretty good month in terms of what I was reading, and I'm hoping August will be more of the same. So with that, I do hope you enjoyed this video. Please do remember to like and subscribe. Comment down below about your thoughts about any of the books I finished reading and looking at reading. If there's any galleys you want me to try and get so I can read them and review them for you, I'd be happy to do that. But until then, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk at you in another video. Bye!